James Krasnerick at Real Steel Sports had an unfortunate moment on Sunday. Sunday, as of 10 p.m. that day, I can no longer bash Joe Flacco over radio. He's done what I thought he never would be able to do, and that's win a Super Bowl. I thought he'd be one of those guys like a Dan Fouts, like a Dan Marino, like a Boomer Esiason. Good quarterback, maybe possibly great, but wouldn't win the big game. Well, I've been proven wrong. James Krasnerick live here at Real Steel Sports. I didn't do my wrap-up of the Super Bowl immediately after the game or yesterday because I wanted to let everything more or less just die down for a while before I decided to go into it instead of going into the heat of the moment. But I gotta say right now, Flacco came to play. He did. He came to play. 22 of 33, 287 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Pass rating of 124. Just absolutely dissected the 49ers defense. I did not pick the score of that game correctly. I said Baltimore would win 24-20. But the final score is 34-31, much more high scoring. I thought more or less the defenses would have a better day than they did. But if you look at it, there are 5 sacks between the defenses and only 3 turnovers. It was a game that wasn't so much dominated by turnovers and things like that. It was dominated by which team had the hot hand. Baltimore started off strong, get into half, and then getting into the second half. Jacoby Jones, 108-yard kickoff return, put them up 28-6. Then the Niners drove down, got to within 5. And then they got to within 2 before the 49ers eventually fell to the Ravens 34-31. I honestly didn't think Flacco should have gotten the MVP. Well, maybe that's a last-ditch attempt to, knock him down a slot. But, I honestly think the MVP should have gone to Jacoby Jones. Because Jacoby Jones totaled exactly 292 total yards. Wait a second. Okay, Jacoby Jones, not 292, I misread that. $290 total yards of offense. And when I watched the way that the Ravens played that game, they really exposed the San Francisco defense with deep passes. Whether they were intermediate deep or just pure deep like the one to Jacoby Jones at the end of the first half, I got to go ahead and give a lot of credit to the way the Ravens came out with their game plan. Ever since they fired Cam Cameron and promoted Jim Caldwell, that offense just went through the roof. Yeah, they did lose a game, to Denver. They lost the game to Cincinnati. But, the games against the Giants, the Patriots, the Broncos, the Colts, they came together. For the 49ers, they were my pick out of the NFC to get to the Super Bowl from the season's beginning. So I was not surprised. I was surprised when they pulled Alex Smith for Kaepernick, even though Kaepernick was a lot more inexperienced than Alex Smith, I thought it was the right choice for this game. Because I don't think Alex Smith would have gotten this team to within 2 points of the Ravens, down 28-6, had it been Alex Smith in the game. That game would have been over by the middle of the fourth quarter. It's just one of those things where Kaepernick's speed as a quarterback, I think, made up a lot for the fact that the team in general was having some offensive difficulties in the first half. The Ravens had the game plan. They had a spy guy for Colin Kaepernick the whole game, which was Courtney Upshaw, the outside linebacker. Almost never do you have to have a spy guy for a quarterback. That just shows how much they respect his speed. But I thought Kaepernick actually played a pretty good game. He threw the one bad pass that was intercepted by Reed, but other than that, and a slightly shaky start, he played pretty damn well. Leading the 49ers to 3 touchdown drives in the second half against the vaunted Ravens defense, that's pretty impressive. I got to give him props for that. What I was amazed at was the Baltimore Ravens pass rush. I mean, the Niners managed 2 sacks in the game, which I was actually surprised they got 2. And the sacks were by Amon Brooks and Ray McDonald. The Ravens had 3 sacks, 2 by Paul Kruger, one by Arthur Jones. But the thing about this game that surprised me was, again, how little of an impact Justin Smith and Aldon Smith, the 2 best players on that defense, arguably, had on the game. They had almost no impact. I mean, Aldon Smith had 2 tackles. Justin Smith had 3. I mean, they were almost non-factors from the get-go. I will say this. I will definitely say this about the San Francisco defense. If Justin Smith would have been, his triceps would have been healthy going into that game against Baltimore, I think the Niners could have possibly pulled that out because they could have put more pressure on Flacco, and Flacco wouldn't have torn up their secondary the way they did. The 49ers are designed a lot like the Steelers were when they lost to the Packers in Super Bowl 45. A team that was prided on pressure from one side of the line, heavy, on the outside, from the linebacker in the defensive front, and the secondary was just designed to more or less not so much play coverage for a long period of time, but more or less just designed to keep the receivers from getting open long enough for the quarterback to get hit. That's pretty much how the Steelers did their business, and that's how the Niners have been doing it. And it's been working because they have the personnel in place. But if you have an injury to one of those key guys, your personnel, it's not going to look as sexy because you're going to have problems stopping the run, and you're going to have problems defending the pass. I mean, I'll give San Francisco credit for this. They stopped the run pretty damn well. Ray Rice only had 53 yards. But in terms of playing pass defense, this team just completely fell apart. I mean, they were probably the best defense in the league for the first 16 weeks of the season. When Justin Smith tore his triceps against New England, even though they won that game and it was a big game going to New England beating them, I still had my doubts. But you have Aldon Smith, 19.5 sacks. Justin Smith, I believe, had a handful himself. And they provided almost no pressure on the quarterback. I mean, yeah, Aldon Smith hit the quarterback once. But it's almost goes to show you, if Aldon Smith does not have help from Justin Smith, can't get to the quarterback. The Ravens, on the other hand, have a defense that can get to the quarterback. I mean, the year that linebacker Paul Kruger had for the Ravens, I mean, he had 9 sacks and 42 tackles. You had Terrell Suggs coming off. He registered a couple of big plays. And you also have the contributions by Danae Ellerbe. He had 9 tackles, 6 solo, and Ed Reed with an interception and a pass deflection. In terms of defense, the Ravens' defense absolutely played better. See, their defense is designed a lot differently from other 3-4 defenses. And that it's not so much that the pressure is going to get to the quarterback and just overwhelm him. It's more or less the fact that they're just trying to confuse the quarterback. And when they do, the quarterback makes a dumb throw. And when the quarterback makes a dumb throw, who's there to intercept it? Mr. Ed Reed, who might be leaving in free agency. You look at some other key players in that game, if you flip it over to the offense, who had the great games. The one thing I did miss on this game was I thought Torrey Smith, the receiver for the Ravens, would have a better game than he did. 2 catches for 35 yards, 1 for 20. But the thing that he did was he drew attention because of his speed. He had a big play early in the first quarter, and the Niners didn't let him out of their sights for the rest of the game. I remember that play. He was lined up against Carlos Rogers, and Carlos Rogers blew the coverage. And from then on, they played zone, and that really kind of quieted Torrey Smith for the rest of the game. But it left Anquan Boldin one-on-one. And unless you are a huge physical cornerback, if you're going against Anquan Boldin one-on-one, you're going to lose. Because he's big, he's strong, he's quicker than you would think, and he's too fast for linebackers and too big for defensive backs. For the Niners, they had 200-yard receivers, Crabtree and Davis. Vernon Davis, I said, was a guy that could have a big, big game in this Super Bowl. I thought that he had the potential against the Ravens inside linebackers who aren't very good in space, like Lewis and Ellerby. I thought he could have a really, really good chance at having a big game. And he had 6 catches for $104 and 29-yard gain for his longest. Crabtree had a touchdown and 109 on 5 catches. So it just goes to show you that, even though the Niners may have been blown out at the start of the game, they were able to come back and put up some numbers. Frank Gore had 100 yards and Colin Kaepernick had 300 yards passing and a touchdown. The Niners are the only team to score 31 points, at least 31 points, and lose a Super Bowl. The other being the 1978 Cowboys when they lost to the 1978 Steelers. My opinion, the greatest team of all time, but that's a different story, different time. My opinion on this game was that in the first quarter and the second quarter, I think Jim Harbaugh made a couple mistakes. For one, they kind of ate up timeouts a little more than they should have. Number two, they didn't open the playbook for Colin Kaepernick. They really didn't open the playbook enough from the first half. And it showed. Colin Kaepernick's at his best when he's running the pistol. He can make some plays and make some fakes with his arm and handoffs and throw the ball down the field to guys like Crabtree and Davis and Moss. They didn't do that in the first 2 quarters. They did it in the third and the fourth. And that's what got the game back and close. If the Niners would have started off with a more or less an open idea of what they were going to do in the first 2 quarters, I think they possibly could have won that game because I don't see how Baltimore goes up 28-6. The Jacoby Jones, I think, was more or less a lapse in attention from the defense. As the game went on, though, it became pretty apparent that the Niners are having trouble, being stopped by the Ravens. The Ravens just could not get off the field in the second half, even though for the game the Niners only went 2 for 9 on break points. It is my honest opinion that the power outage didn't necessarily hurt the Ravens in the early third quarter. It didn't hurt them so much as it helped the 49ers. Because, even though Baltimore only put up 6 points in a quarter and a half after that, the Niners put up 3 touchdowns, a field goal, and a safety. So, post-blackout, the 49ers outscored the Ravens 25-6. That's a big difference. It is. It's a big difference because it just goes to show you how much that little delay did. Because I think it gave time for Jim Harbaugh to rally the troops. And the fourth quarter, that was an exciting fourth quarter. You have Yinzer Nation for the Steelers. They were rooting hard for pretty much either rooting hard for one team or rooting really hard against both. Several Steeler fans are rooting for both teams to lose. Personally, I wanted the Ravens to win because think about it. I love the Steelers as much as anybody. And, it seems un-Steeler fan-like to root for the Ravens. However, on certain circumstances, you kind of have to root for teams you don't like. Let's put it this way. If the Steelers were 11-4 in Week 16, entering Week 17, and the Bengals were 11-4, and due to tiebreaker, we needed the Baltimore Ravens to beat the Bengals, I'm on the Baltimore bandwagon for that game all day long. I'll be the biggest Joe Flacco fan you have. But openly, no, I'm not going to root for the Ravens. I only root for them if they have to. Same thing with the Cowboys, the Patriots, the Browns, the Bengals, like that. But where do both teams go from here? But actually, I will get to that in a second. But I want to talk about the pass interference call at the end of the game because everybody and their mother's been bitching about it. I thought it was a good no call. I did. In the regular season, I'm not so sure that gets called. Because even though Crabtree was being held, clearly, he was pushing off as well. He was like, trying to. Let's not forget about 7-8 years ago in the Super Bowl, the Steelers got a push off call go their way when Darrell Jackson pushed off one of our defensive backs, the receiver for Seattle, pushed off one of our defensive backs, caught a touchdown, but they overruled it because of offensive pass interference. I think the same principle is in the ref's mind here, is that they both were kind of having contact, but since it was both contact, I think it kind of wiped it out. That's what I think the ref thought. Looking at it, it looks like pass interference. It looks horribly like either pass interference, which can't happen because it wouldn't have been 5 yards. The end zone, I think they were on the 4-yard line at that point. It would have been defensive holding. Defensive holding would have been half the distance to the goal, first down of the Niners, and I think then they just march right in. Let's put it this way. If that penalty is called, I'm not talking about how the Niners only have 5 rings, because they would have punched it in. And speaking of punched it in, you're on the 5-yard line. You're inside the 10 with 4 downs to work with. You have probably the fastest quarterback in the league at your disposal, and you throw it 4 straight times. What sense does that make? I don't even remember if it was 4 straight. I just know that Kaepernick attempted at least 3 passes inside the 5-yard line. I mean, come on, man. Come on, Harbaugh. Or should I say, come on, Jim. You had how many chances, and you have one of the fastest quarterbacks in the league, and you don't use his speed. How did they get to that game? They didn't get to the Super Bowl with Kaepernick throwing a shitload of passes every single game. They got to that Super Bowl by their running of Gore, Kaepernick, and LaMichael James about 40 times a game, and Kaepernick throwing 25. Kaepernick attempted 28 passes in this game. Honestly, even against the Ravens, still too much. I will say that I think if they do decide to run out of the pistol and let Kaepernick keep the football, he walks into the end zone. Because there's nobody on the defense that's going to track him down. You look at the guys in that area of the field. Lewis, Ellerbe, Bernard Pollard. They're not fast enough to keep up with him. And you got guys like Ed Reed and Kerry Williams. They're not strong enough to hold him back. The guy's like 6'5", and he's freaking fast. All you got to do is just let Kaepernick keep the football, and he walks. He walks in slow motion into the end zone. That's how wide open it would have been. But yeah, back to what I was getting about earlier. My opinion on where these two teams go forward. I'll be doing an NFL preview show for next season coming up shortly. But I have to say right now, if there's any team in the NFL right now that this had to be the year they won a Super Bowl, they're going to win it with a core group of guys, it was this year's Ravens team. You look at the 49ers roster. You got guys, Kaepernick, Gore, Crabtree, Davis. They get Kyle Williams, Mara Manningham, Delaney Walker, Kendall Hunter off IR. Ted Ginn's still a young guy. That defense, minus the age of Justin Smith, is a very, very young defense. You have all those guys coming back. You're going to be contention for another 4 or 5 years. That's why I root for the Ravens to win this game, because I know the Niners are going to have a chance to win a 6th ring in the near future. This Ravens team would have been the last time they'd had a chance to do it. I mean, although they got young guys like, Dixon and Jones, Smith, Pitta, Rice, Flacco, Leach. They got a bunch of young guys. You have to understand something. That defense is old. Terrell Suggs is getting old. Ray Lewis is old, and he's not going to be back anymore because he's retired. Ed Reed's probably gone through free agency. Yeah, they get Ladarius Webb, their almost Pro Bowl cornerback off injured reserve, but I don't know if the Ravens are going to win 10 games next year. I don't know how's Flacco going to handle success. How's that team going to handle success? I know John Harbaugh's probably going to keep the troops hungry and ready for more titles possibly, but I say that next year they're one of the teams that could experience more or less a drop-off in play. It'd be like what happened with the 05 Steelers to the 06 season. I mean, the 05 Steelers had won 11-5, got the playoffs, won the Super Bowl for Bettis. Bettis retires, the team goes downhill, loses 3 more games than they did the year before. I think maybe a 9-7 or 8-8 record. It doesn't seem like much of a fall off from 10-6, but when you consider the fact that it's probably going to take at least 10 wins for any of the AFC teams, the 6 teams, to make the playoffs, that's a pretty big step backwards. The Niners next year, their division Arizona's going to be an afterthought. I mean, I know they hired Bruce Arians at coach and got Larry Fitzgerald at receiver, but seriously, the quarterback situation is a bigger mess than any of Taylor Swift's breakups. It's a mess because we have to hear about them. Thank you, Taylor. We all love to hear about how you're going to break up with Harry. Jesus. Anyways, you look at St. Louis. They just claimed disgruntled Lions receiver Titus Young off waivers. That's a good pickup for them because Jeff Fisher's a coach with that preaches discipline. He'll fix Titus Young up and he'll have himself a new target for Sam Bradford. They've got a high draft pick. They can go out and get some weapons, whether it be on offense or defense. I look for the St. Louis Rams to possibly contend for a wild card next year. They're going to be a good team. They got a good defense. Sam Bradford's on the rise. They're going to be in the thick of it. But the team to watch in the NFC next year, and right now my pick to go to the Super Bowl out of that conference, is the Seattle Seahawks. You have Pro Bowlers at pretty much every phase of that defense. You've got youth. You've got experience mixed on the roster. You've got a coach that seems to know what he wants and knows how to get it in Pete Carroll. I mean, Carroll, his coaching experience in the 90s with the Jets and the Patriots was borderline humorous. He's put together a hell of a team in Seattle, him and management. They've been to the playoffs twice, in 2010 and 2012, and they've won a playoff game every year they've gone. Once they beat the defending champion Saints, a game I'm trying to forget, and then they go in this year and beat RG3 and the Redskins. I got to give props to what the Seahawks have done, and the Niners are going to have to really up their game next year if they hope to repeat as NFC West champions. I look at Baltimore as a team that's probably going to go 9-7. I think 9-7 is a good season for them. I haven't seen the schedule yet; it's not been released. But losing Ray Lewis to retirement, possibly more than likely Ed Reed to free agency, with the fact that Flacco's going to get paid a shitload of money. I know they get some players back off injuries, but how does Flacco handle success? Because he's always played well because he's had that chip on his shoulder to get better. Well, he's won a Super Bowl and been the MVP. How's he going to handle having to back it up? Because he's never had to back anything up. He's always been the guy, can he do it? Now it's, can he repeat it? And that's a completely different story. Getting to the mountaintop is one thing, but staying there and asserting your dominance is a completely different animal. The 49ers, I say 12-4 is a good season for them. I think that's probably what they'll do. Their ceiling's probably a couple wins higher, and the basement for them is probably about 2 wins lower. But I have 2 question marks on that team going next year. What is Justin Smith's status? Because in games where he was hurt / inactive, the Niners' pass rush almost disappeared. Aldon Smith had 19.5 sacks through Week 13. Did not have a single sack in Weeks 14 through 17. That's 4 games, and then 3 playoff games. 7 straight games without a sack. And the second one, it's not so much of will something be bad, but will something be good. What will they be able to do now in the offense next year with a full offseason to get some weapons back on offense and Colin Kaepernick having a full training camp as the starter? That's going to be interesting. I think they could really do some damage next year because he threw 10 touchdowns in 7 starts. I mean, he had a great year. But what we'll be able to do now, what we'll see now is full potential whenever he's able to, have a full off season to prepare as the starter. And speaking of quarterbacks on that roster, what are they going to do with Alex Smith? Because there's rumors he could go to Arizona, to Kansas City, to New York to play for the Jets. Personally, I already know a dumbass team's going to throw a lot more money at Alex Smith than they should this offseason. I'm just waiting to see which dumb team it is. And I got a funny feeling it's going to be the guys in green up in New York playing as the Jets. They're going to be the dumb team. I guarantee you right now, they're the dumb team that gets rid of Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow and decides to get Alex Smith. Because clearly the situation with Sanchez in New York has been a complete and total flub. But one more question remains about this game. Is Joe Flacco elite? Where does he rank among the top NFL quarterbacks? Well, let's do a list right now. At the top, you've got Peyton Manning, you've got Aaron Rodgers, you've got Tom Brady. Then you've got guys like Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, and Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, and Eli Manning, probably in that tier. Joe Flacco's right there with those guys. I heard one guy say that now that Joe Flacco's won a Super Bowl, he's as good as Ben Roethlisberger. And that's no. Flacco's not as good as Roethlisberger. I'll take Big Ben over Flacco any day. Because Flacco will have 2 games where he throws for a pass rating of 130, and then have 2 games where he can't even hit 30. You know, his consistency still is not conducive to me putting him as a top-flight NFL quarterback. Is he very, very good? Yes. But elite means you're truly one of the best in the league. And I think for Flacco to do that, he's got to put together a really good regular season to do that. Because he's been very, very spotty in that regards. In fact, you can make the argument that Matt Ryan, if you eliminate the playoffs, has been the better quarterback, which he has. More Pro Bowl appearances and a deeper conference of quarterbacks. You know? I think Flacco is a top 10 quarterback in this league, obviously. I had him at number 15 prior to this at midway through this season, past season. I think I bumped him up to 8th. I bumped him up to 10th after the playoff run. I'm going to bump him up to 8th. Because you got Rodgers, Brady, the 2 Manning brothers, Roethlisberger, and Brees to put ahead of him. If you could make an argument for another guy that I think could be ahead of Joe Flacco, it'd be tough to make it with anybody. So I think I'll put him at number 7. Because you look at the quarterbacks in this league that have won Super Bowls, and he's right there with them. And he had the 2nd most impressive playoff run in league history. 11 touchdowns, no picks through 4 games. That's Joe Montana stuff. Anyways, that's my opinion on the Super Bowl. I hope you guys enjoyed the game. I thought it was a great game. At least the second half was. Keep tuned. Stay tuned for this week. I will be doing my official 2013 NFL preview. Don't go anywhere.